Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Duval Dive. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, a student of the game of Fans First Sports Network.
And I'm Travis Holmes with BigCatCountry.com.
And of course, you're listening to all of this go down on the Bleav Network. And speaking of the Bleav Network, Travis, our first official family interview. That's right, our first Bleav guests jumping aboard. You know them and love them from Bleav in Rams, or at least you should. And if you haven't yet, get a hold of your life and check them out. I know this is a Jags show, but we got to throw them their props for a number of reasons, especially for all the stuff we've been hearing about LA East out here in Duval with all that. But first off, let me start with Erin Coscarelli of Bleav in Rams and also covering Wimbledon on the Tennis Network. I have to mention that because my mom was telling me she misses watching it as often as she used to. Just today, literally. I'm not making that up. So shouts to you, Erin. Welcome in.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, here for Patty. I heard Patty's a big fan. So as long as I'm making Patricia happy, that's all that matters. So
let's go. Shouts to already. I have the short. I have to send to mom directly tonight. I'm all about that life. And of course, over here on my bottom left, TylerDragon, of course, also Bleav in Rams, does his thing as well with USA Today. Tyler, welcome in as well. All I can claim is I wrote for the Dolphins Wire of USA Today once. Does that count? I don't know. I only mentioned that because Fitzpatrick got traded and then he was traded while I was writing for. I don't know. We're tangenting. It's my fault.
It's part of the USA Today network.
Exactly. You get it. You know, shouts all around there. There we go. I had
y'all cousins. I got you. Y'all cousins. Let's go. I got you.
You know. We'll leave it at that. But let's get right into it with this, guys. I know that there's always, at some point, you've heard something, I think, on your side of the country about Jimmy Stone's arriving here, Liam Coen coming and doing his thing as the boy wonder offensive guy, and the Jags being referred to as LA East. When Liam Coen or Jimmy Stones get brought up, I mean, you may not know him as Jimmy Stones. He hadn't traded for Travis Hunter yet and publicly said bleep them picks or whatever. But what it does get to what is it that when you guys were there, what were kind of hallmarks? I know that they were at a lesser position, that Sean McVay was still, and still is rather the big force there. But what is there anything noticeable from you guys' perspective that's different now that they're gone, especially since, camp, you guys just did your photo because it's on camp this past week on Bleav in Rams. So what is something that you might notice that's different since their departure at all for you guys?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is James Gladstone kind of learned from under Les Snead. And, Snead even talked about it during draft night when the Jags made that huge trade that, shocked the NFL world that, he said, I forget the direct quote, but he was like, yeah, that's James. It was something to the effect that, yeah, I mean, he always had that type of moxie, that type of, personality to be aggressive and to go for, what he wants and that conviction. And, what was interesting to me, and I actually wrote about it on draft night, day one, that, he actually called Les Snead to get some, input on Travis Hunter and some input on, just the type of person he is, the type of player he is. And Les Snead told us reporters who were there, he was recalling back, thinking to himself, why is he calling me? He's not in position to draft Travis Hunter. He's not going to be up there when Travis Hunter is going to be picked at number 1 or number 2. And then lo and behold, I mean, he makes what's your nickname for him?
Jimmy Stone. Yeah, we got to give full credit. It's not even us that gave it to him. It was a Browns podcast. Having observed this happen, shouts to Casey Kinnaman of the Barking Browns podcast. He's like, I was on his show. He said Jimmy Stones. I'm like, from your perspective, having pulled the trigger on that, two Browns. So, anyways, I got to give him his credit. I'm sorry, Tyler.
Yeah, well, that a great nickname, nevertheless, well deserving. But I expect that type of same Rams philosophy in Jacksonville because he learned from one of the best GMs in football. And I think that's not hyperbole to say that about Les Snead. I mean, a Super Bowl champion, F them picks. He knows how to be aggressive. I mean, when you talk about the Rams, what I marvel at is when you look at when they won a Super Bowl until now, they've transitioned their roster in a way where it's not even rebuilding. It's like kind of retooling. They've been competitive since Aaron Donald left, since Jalen Ramsey left. So I expect James to incorporate that type of mindset, that type of philosophy, and say, you know what? Yeah, we had a down year in Jacksonville last year, but I'm still going to be aggressive. I'm going to get players like Travis Hunter, who can be a marquee player in my franchise. In my opinion, he's going to be the face of the franchise very soon. And I think you guys are in for a real treat, an aggressive type of approach with him at GM.
Well, and I'll say this too, really quick. Travis, I'm going to tell on you a little bit, and I apologize in advance for that. But I can tell you in the draft immediately following Aaron Donald's retirement, or I think that's the timeline. But I know that Travis was pounding the table for Jared Verse out of FSU to end up in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
That did not happen, quite obviously, because of, the actions of the front office of one Les Snead indeed. With all that in mind, just had to throw it out there that somebody else has noted some of the stuff that's gone on there with that defense across country. Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I'm sorry I cut out briefly. Blame my laptop. It's been happening a lot recently. So I missed a little bit of what my co-host Tyler said. But just to sort of add on to what he said during the draft, we got to hear sort of this like almost proud big brother, older father notion from Les Snead with regards to James and Liam and what they're up to. And I feel like, and by the way, shout out to you guys. I love that this is something that we're talking about now, getting sort of a chance to dissect and discuss sort of the Rams of the East, if you will, because I am certainly going to be paying attention to what the Jags are doing this season because of what, I love these types of conversations. It's like almost talking sports business and sociology and what this means potentially in the NFL, which is why I love that, this is a topic you guys wanted to discuss. And I think the thing that we've seen, Tyler and I've been covering the Rams now this past year since spring of last season. And one of the things, we were kind of talking about it off the show, which is, covering the Rams and being invited in a way that the media feels sort of invited to participate in. And we even heard from Davante Adams at the last OTAs that the culture and the environment that Sean McVay really tries to impart on the collective, on the team, is a positive one, right? You guys heard Davante say there's no looming dark cloud over the building. Take what they did at mandatory minicamp. They went to Maui. So, this sort of like collaborative effort where we're seeing this youth being infused and Shad Khan taking a chance on what the Jags had, a 4-win campaign last year, right? Wasn't that the same 4 wins that when they made the choice to hire Sean McVay in 2017? So there's so many parallels with the Jags taking a chance, wanting this youth infused sort of dynamic in the front office, in the leadership position. Not only to me speaks volumes to what the Jags are doing and why I'm going to pay attention to them this season, but also think about how this is shifting what we're seeing in the NFL. Like they're going younger. They want to connect more to collegiate athletes, but also if you're younger, you're more adept to being malleable. And I think, anyways, I'll finish with this. I think the thing that speaks volumes about Sean McVay and Les Snead's leadership is they're really good listeners. Wouldn't you say, Ty?
Yeah, very good.
I would argue that's very similar, if not carbon copy print, the exact same thing that we hear from the majority of the Jacksonville Jaguars players and the guys in the locker room.
Ben from last week. He was calling,
Mhm.
I don't want no VCR GM was what he said.
Yeah.
That you now, granted, not that Ben isn't eloquent, but the way you broke it down, Erin, I think speaks perfect to that sentiment of you need a different voice. It needs to be somebody else. And listen, I'm in the unique position of having come across Belky twice in following football as a 49er follower, as somebody who covers the Jags. It's nice to see a brighter face, for lack of a better word. But here's what I think is interesting. This is what I wanted to bounce off you guys too. You talk about both Coach Coen and Jimmy Stones being approachable, asking questions, listening, all that stuff. However, there is that sense, despite the we bring you in here to be what you're supposed to be, there is that sense. And there's a Travis, you'll hear when I say this, you'll remember what I'm getting to. That doesn't mean you're safe either. They brought you in here to do something. And I mean, in particular to the O-line in Jacksonville, I'm sure. If you aren't what they're looking for, they will move on and find somebody who is. And I think it's that element too. I think that Jacksonville very much needs. I'm not saying that they're going to turn Trevor Lawrence into John Matthew Stafford out there and win a Super Bowl or nothing. But this is the start to the rebuild of that foundation. Does that kind of make sense as well as something Jacksonville may get from these guys?
I have a follow-up question for you that I want both of you to answer, if I may.
Okay, go for it.
So based on what you said, who has the longer leash, Trevor Lawrence or the head coach and GM in Jacksonville?
Oh, jeez. I gotta go. I gotta go. The longest leash is going to be the head coach and the GM because they are truly flipping over this organization and leaning into that youth movement where we're talking about a GM who also was a part of the. Was he not a part of the trade to trade Jared Goff and Matt Stafford? Like.
Yeah,
I was just gonna relate to that. I think you have to trust your chosen ones, right? Because look at what McVay did. Like Kroenke, Les Snead had to trust McVay to sort of get rid of Goff and of course bring Stafford. And obviously the ROI was fruitful for them, right? But that's why you bring in those guys. Those guys are going to be the ones to make the tough choices to rebrand and rebuild your franchise. And I think, why are you bringing them in if you can't trust, while I love that question, Tyler, if you can't trust the decisions that they make?
I need folks to just think about that for a second. Just for a second. Think about how much cachet, think about how much weight, how big your cojones have to be to walk into the owner's office and say, I'm going to trade away the guy who you considered the franchise just last year. The guy, that's wild. And also, I'm not saying that's going to be an expectation of the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, but you have to believe if you've seen the past GMs, and not just GM, I'm talking the past, I don't know, 4 GM, basically every GM that's not named Tom Coughlin in Duval County. Yeah, if you've seen that history, you kind of have to believe they're leaning into this youth movement. They're going to give them a legitimate opportunity, and they have to have more, give more rope than a Trevor Lawrence because he's a player. GMs can hire, 5. They can be here for 25, 30 years. Players can just be here for 5 and be out of here. Like, that's unfortunately, that's just the NFL, man, which is why Trent Baalke being here for so long also was so damaging. Just to be clear.
I'm glad you said it this time because they're done with me saying it, Travis. Goodness gracious. No, I think there's a lot of there. And I'll throw this option in here too, because we've talked about the spectacular trade that was Travis Hunter. But leading up to that, the number of articles I wrote on Fans First Sports Network. Sorry, that's the gimmick. My bad. But the number of articles I've written on Fans First Sports Network about, okay, here's the chance, the chalkboards and the string across the room for all the conspiracy theory that I came up with for Travis Hunter at 5. Never saw 2 coming. But I mention that because up to that point, clearly you're insane if you don't pick Mason Graham at defensive tackle. That didn't happen here. Now, as people who cover the Rams, and Erin, I think you spent a little time covering the Niners as well with the way we're talking about Harbaugh. This also means to you having a unique insight that I wouldn't have, but is closer to what Jimmy Stones and Liam Coen might. Not only did the Jags pass on Mason Graham, they kept one Eric Armstead in the room. Does that sound like an endorsement by this new staff from where you sit? Because we used to play him twice a year. It makes sense with Liam Coen as the guy who was involved with game planning at the time, may not have been calling the plays. This feels like an endorsement that Armstead would have gotten only from guys like this here. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Do I have a good path there in my head?
I mean, I think you have to trust. I think that those guys know what they're doing. It's funny too, when you talk about like Trent Baalke, not only are you familiar with him, but also he didn't get along with Jim Harbaugh. And the question always remained for me when you were mentioning Trent was who, right? Because remember, Jim Harbaugh went 8-8, and the cohesiveness, the energy, the trust, it was splitting at the seams in San Francisco. Colin Kaepernick was getting all kinds of sort of criticism. Coach Harbaugh obviously ended up getting fired. Trent Baalke remained. And it's not lost on me that they're wanting some new energy, some new unique decision makers in that building. And like I said, I don't know the answers. I just know and it may not happen this season. I think we also have to be really patient with what the Jags are going to look like. Perhaps maybe make more bold opinions in the offseason of next year, and having another draft under their belt. But I think at the end of the day, like, this is why it's fascinating to be in like the sports business industry, right? Because we're covering the NFL, and I think, Shad Khan, they know what they're doing, or in some respect, they're figuring out like a philosophy or a mold that somehow speaks to young, and that was the other thing I wanted to mention that Tyler and I would talk about all season long was the challenge and pick up if what I'm putting down makes sense, Tyler. But wouldn't you say the main storyline for the Rams that also sort of feels like a storyline for the Jags this year is sort of tying in the old regime with the new regime? Wouldn't you say? That was sort of the tough thing that the Rams front office had to navigate last year, right? Aaron Donald was gone.
I agree with your Rams take, tying in the old regime with the new regime. I think it's totally different with the Jaguars. And that's why I kind of posed that question originally, because I was leading to, I think the trade up to get Travis Hunter was a culture shift for Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. Jacksonville, in my opinion, is one of the few franchises now where the face of the franchise is probably not going to be Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be Travis Hunter. Trevor Lawrence, yes, he's had an up and down career. He's had some great moments. He's had some so-so moments. And he's had some moments where he's looked like a middle tier to bottom tier quarterback. So this regime inherited Trevor Lawrence. This regime traded up a boatload to get Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, in my opinion, was the best draft prospect in this year's draft. They had Travis Hunter. You guys can probably speak to on the marquee Jacksonville Jaguars page, probably in billboards in Jacksonville. Isn't Jacksonville getting a new stadium soon? Am I correct by that?
You're accurate, yeah.
So you got the marquee player in the draft. You traded up to get him. And I think the GM even said, this is a new day in Jacksonville. This is a culture shift. This is a franchise-altering move. So that, to me, signals that the Jaguars are like changing the whole thing, and they have a new face of the franchise, and Trevor Lawrence has to get in where he fits in and prove that he is the quarterback of the future for the Jaguars. Because if he has a season similar to last year, where it's just like, okay, you really didn't get better. You're decent, but you're not what we really need at quarterback. Then you're going to see what Rams-esque moves where, I'm meeting a quarterback in Mexico on my vacation trip. Oh, in the middle of the night, we're going to make a trade because it has that type of feel. Because Jared Goff was a productive quarterback for the Rams. He led the Rams to the Super Bowl. He wasn't bad. Was he great? No. Sounds kind of familiar what I said about Trevor Lawrence. He wasn't bad, but he's not. He hasn't been great either. I mean, he's led them to the playoffs, got a playoff win, but this new regime inherited him. They didn't handpick the quarterback. So if he doesn't perform well, it would not surprise me at all. Jaguars would be like, we're going to look for different answers, and we already have our marquee player, which is Travis Hunter, who we just put up a whole bunch to go get.
No, there's a lot of there with that, and I would ask this too. You mentioned, Erin, well, both of you mentioned the old and the new tying together. I feel like, and I think you said it in a different way, Tyler. I think they're trying to distance themselves from the past, right? They're getting away from the GM that was just about to hire the 6th coach in his career, spanning back to San Francisco. They want that in the rear view. I get that completely. And let me ask it, because we're mentioning Trevor and. Well, listen, I'll show my quick credentials there with my Aaron Evans original about my playing days. I am beef. I succumbed to my bias towards the O-line, and I feel like they let Trevor down a lot too. I don't think we're talking enough about that. But the thing I will speak to that I can't help but notice, I'm taking nothing from John Matthew Stafford. He was underappreciated in Detroit and probably contributed to his arrival in LA. I'll leave that at that.
Yeah.
But a number of young weapons began to emerge under his tenure. We aren't going to talk necessarily about Trevor Lawrence getting a career out of both Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. What I'm referring to is it could be argued, guys, that we have BTJ Brian Thomas Jr. Granted, he's younger than Kupp was. And now on the other side, playing in the aggregate of the Puka Nacua role would be Travis Hunter and De'Ami Brown potentially. That's fascinating. It's not a perfect analogy, but you gotta dig getting weapons for your guy. I think that's an element that's kind of similar between the two franchises as well. Do you guys see that?
I see it 100%. But now that it's okay. Now you got to go perform. You got the pieces. You have a really good, probably one of the best young receiving corps in the NFL now. On paper, it certainly looks like it. So what are you going to do with it? My thing with Trevor Lawrence is I haven't seen a progression from season to season. I haven't seen steady growth. And yes, some of that's the franchise's fault. Some of that is the environment. Right. But now that you have a new regime, you have new weapons around you, what are you going to do to prove to this new regime and to prove to the franchise in your city that you're the franchise quarterback of the present and the future?
Yeah, and in very many ways, he is. I don't want to say he's on a hot seat because I think that'd be an over exaggeration.
But it's on him. It's on him, yeah.
But while also saying that that's in the realm of possibilities. Like you can say he's not on the hot seat and he can be on the hot seat by the middle of the season. I also don't think that's such a wild take, if that makes sense, based on how his performance goes. That conversation can be wildly different. So I kind of agree with all the takes. Like it sounds kind of crazy, but at the same time, because his contract doesn't really kick in until 2026, the contract that was signed under Trent Baalke. So if you're looking at the money, but they've already shown you this general manager and head coach have already shown you they don't care about the picks. And they literally said the MFTP, man, them picks. Like it's the same thing with the money. With the dead cap and cutting, Gabe Davis injured and letting Christian Kirk go for basically nothing to Houston, etc. Like at the end of the day, they've kind of leaned into this is going to be a new build and it's going to have their print all over it. So I kind of agree with your overall assessment. It's just I'm happy to see that there's a new organization, new head coach, new scheme, new players, etc., to support Trevor Lawrence. And I kind of said the same thing on last week with Ben Troop. I'm just looking forward to seeing if he's going to be an above average to maybe even a great quarterback now that the excuses seemingly are gone outside of maybe the offensive line. That's still another question mark we'll kind of get to.
I do have a question because I think this is a really good topic. And again, not just catering to Jacksonville fans, but to Raider fans and to fans that have had so much turnover. I don't know how many, what is this? Is this Trevor's third? Is it his third coach or his third coach?
Third coach
in 5. How many years? Yeah. He's had so much turnover. My question for you guys is when you have like a Derek Carr. When I was with the Raiders, Derek Carr had like 8 offensive coordinators. How do you, I'm not trying to defend, but I just wonder if the sort of instability allows, like, how, I think Tyler's question is a great question, but asking for him to go back to his 2022 form, or to me, or 23 form, whenever he had that season, I think it's the question should be asked, in a, bottom line, business like the NFL, how much do we mind consistency when we have young guys expected to, hold the keys and turn things around? Not discrediting his performance, but does that play a factor or a role? I mean, I guess in Stafford's case, it didn't, right? Because he just came and he was pretty legit right away. But do you take that into consideration when the fan base, I'm kind of speaking to the fan base here, when they show they're frustrated, and how frustrated are they?
Well, I'll let you take it home as the card carrying member of the Duval Dive here, Travis. But I would cite a couple things. For one, when Stafford started out, he was struggling staying healthy an entire year, and I went on record years ago, and you could dig in the confines of some archive somewhere, the original Student of the Game podcast. I said the first year he makes it through a season, the Lions go to the playoffs. I mean, hey, back then predicting the Lions to the playoffs was a lot more bold than it is now. Just throwing that out there. So I think there's an element of that with Trevor. But Kyle, Trevor wasn't hurt in 16. No, he was just mired in Urban's coaching in what might be one of the worst coaching performances in NFL history. And then the past 2 years, he hasn't completed a season fully healthy. I know nobody completes a season fully healthy, but the Al-Shaair hit, taking him out for the length that it did, certainly impacted what the Jags were doing, and certainly an element of his performance. And I know that you're going to have more takes than that, Travis, certainly ones that less involve the offensive line for sure. But I'll say it is the last regime told us that they were going to fix the physicality up front in front of Trevor. And the ones that did, or at least are starting to, are Jimmy Stones, Tony Baselli. By the way, nice to have a Hall of Fame offensive lineman as an executive vice president. We haven't mentioned him yet. He doesn't have the Rams connection, but he's still a factor, So that's where I like the comparison between Trevor and Stafford and the potential revitalizing there. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And the pieces around him are starting to fall in place too. I'm not making excuses for him, Tyler. Don't think I'm an apologist. Everything you said holds true. I just think there's some other there. But yeah, go ahead, Trav.
So you and you know me, and for those who are listening to the pod who've known me from my early Big Cat Country days, when we're talking over a decade ago, when first few years of Trevor's time here, the first half of 2022 before he got on fire, and his first season, I was a never Trevor guy. Like, it wasn't even a close conversation. So I've been called both a never Trevor guy and Trevor apologist guy, because I'm also the same guy who wrote the article on Big Cat Country that stated Trevor Lawrence does not have a turnover problem because he actually improved on his interceptions, and he just has more of a fumbling problem, which also was indicative of a bad coaching staff. And it's a great long form breakdown that talks about all the reasons why and everything else. But the gist of it being is, They destroyed him with the coaching staff. They destroyed him with the general manager and the shotgun marriage between those two that was incompatible. And you also have a quarterback who is struggling, just learning the base of an NFL offense for the first time in his career, not being the guy. Brought in to be the guy, but not being the guy. And in a lot of ways, you just hit it on the head. That's very similar to a Matt Stafford type situation, maybe even very similar to an Andrew Luck type situation where he just keeps getting injured. They're just not giving him the support that he obviously needs as far as the offensive line, as far as the supporting staff, etc. But then you can also make the exact opposite argument for guys like Josh Allen, who's also had 3 offensive coordinators in his career. Jalen Hurts, who's also had like 6 offensive coordinators in his career. And these guys are somehow finding ways to produce. Now, I'm not going to say that this coaching staff or general manager is on the same level of those guys, but they're obviously not. There's a reason that they're home right now. But there is some give and take that you have to say, all right, some of this is on Trevor Lawrence. Absolutely and obviously. And some of this is on that coaching staff. And I don't know where that line kind of goes, because at this current moment in time, talking to me right now and talking to other fans in Jacksonville, people who I believe know ball, people I say, hey, I know you watch tape. I watch tape with you at least. I'll say that the Jaguars overall, yes, they hurt Trevor Lawrence, and he actually elevated Doug Peterson, who did not want to he did not want to modernize his offense. And the general manager, Trent Baalke, kind of hurt both Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence, just not wanting to give him the supporting staff that he needed, whereas just brought in guys who he thought would like be fine, be average, and just hope that Trevor Lawrence made them elite. Trevor Lawrence does not seem to be the elite guy right now, but he does seem to be a guy who is raising the floor. The problem is he's not raising it enough based on the other ills that they have at the general manager position and at the coaching position. So that's kind of that context where I want to walk that line and say it's not either here or there. It's 51% coaching staff and GM, 49% Trevor, but that 49% is still a dang good percentage, and that's still an F overall. Everybody's failing. We got to hopefully James Gladstone can round that thing up and we can make this thing work out. But that's kind of where I'm landing, man.
That I would knew you were gonna have something good. I wasn't ready for that. The failing in the aggregate thing. Listen, you're right in my wheelhouse, being a data guy. Let's go. I'm gonna let's get something more fun now that we talked about math and school and tests and stuff.
I'm sorry.
Why would you apologize? Don't I call myself
I like numbers. I like numbers. I have an accounting degree. Folks don't know that because I played football and they think I'm a dumb job, but I actually do well with numbers also. So let's get this thing going, man.
Listen, Travis, I've never questioned your intelligence because you play football. I question your intelligence because you were a DB. Anyway.
I will Al-Shire your ankle, sir. No.
So anyway, this is what we do. Sorry, guys. We're having fun. Thanks for jumping in with us. Bleav in Rams, Erin Coscarelli, TylerDragon. Erin, tell the world we can be found. Anything we need to know about beyond Tennis Network and Wimbledon, of course.
Yes, of course. We're doing Wimbledon coverage, and you can, of course, get all the high tea on my social at Erin Coscarelli, X, Instagram, all the things, even TikTok these days.
I'm growing up and getting on TikTok, and by I mean Travis is helping me with the Duval Dive. Do that. Tyler, tell the world where you could be found and what you got going on.
Well, I'm old school. I do not have TikTok, but you can follow me on X at the TylerDragon and read all my latest work on usatoday.com. I just came out with my top 10 free agents still available that published today. So, yeah, you can check that out on usatoday.com.
My personal champion, Travis D. Holmes, tell the world.
Oh, and of course, you can find me on all the socials, Travis D. Holmes. But most importantly, you can find my writings covering the Jaguars, BigCatCountry.com. I mean, obviously it's the off season. We got to stay locked into all the camp and all the upcoming, pressers from the camp. We got to stay locked in to make sure we have our tickets to training camp that's coming out. Please, 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 I'm begging you guys to stay alert. Put the Jaguars socials on notifications on, because once those training camp tickets become open, they're going to be gone in like 24 hours because everybody and their mama want to see Travis Hunter. You know what this is. So please be alert, be aware. You're not going to have time. This is not previous years in Duval County. If any of you saw OTAs, you know what that was. Those tickets were gone immediately. So Stay alert. Travis D. Holmes on the socials, BigCatCountry.com. We have you guys covered. And sir, Mr. Nash, where can you be found?
Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as a student of the game. Check out my writings with the Fans First Sports Network for your Jacksonville Jaguars, as well as the Orlando Magic, and my work covering UCF football and basketball. blackandgoldbanner.com, and of course, the Night Shift podcast. So for the Bleav in Rams podcast, for my personal champion, Travis D. Holmes, this is Kyle Nash. Until next time, everyone, class dismissed.